Hi, I'm Pastor Kerry. Thanks for joining me for this Good Friday meditation. Do you remember when we were kids and we used to think to ourselves, when I'm an adult, I'm not going to do that. When I'm an adult, I am going to do that. When I'm an adult, I can't wait to do whatever I want. Because we felt like our lives were so difficult when we were kids. And of course now we realize that maybe we were looking at it from a little bit of a slanted perspective when we were kids. But I tried to imagine to myself when I was a kid, what were some of the things that I thought as an adult, I'm never going to do that, or I'm always going to do that. And I put together just a quick list. I just jotted some things down. I remember as a kid thinking, when I'm an adult, I am going to stay up as late as I want. I remember thinking as a kid that as an adult, I'm going to eat nothing but dessert, nothing but stuff with sugar in it and stuff with salt in it, whatever I want, all the snacks that I want, all the things that grown-ups used to tell me that's going to spoil your appetite, I'm going to eat nothing but that stuff. I remember thinking as a kid that as an adult, I would drink all the soda that I wanted. And I must confess to you that I do. And I'm not recommending that. That is not a good thing. Kids, don't try that at home. But unfortunately, I probably am guilty of doing that as an adult. I remember thinking as a kid that I would buy all the comic books and baseball cards that I want. I remember thinking as a kid that when I was told for the 50th time to clean that up, to pick that up, and to go pick up that over there, and I said, but I didn't put that stuff over there. And someone said, well, go pick it up anyway. I remember thinking to myself, when I'm an adult, I'm going to litter whenever and wherever I want. Again, I'm not saying I'm proud that I thought that when I was a kid, but I did think that when I was a kid. I remember thinking as I was riding with one of my friend's parents who was driving what I considered to be ridiculously slowly. I remember thinking, someday when I've got my own car, I'm going to drive 100 miles an hour. And I do remember as a kid when I was doing my latest chore that I was unhappy about having to do. I remember thinking, someday when I'm a grown-up, I'm never going to do any more chores. And obviously we can look back on that and we can laugh. Because when we were kids, we thought that as an adult, when we had the freedom to do what we did want to do or what we didn't want to do, that those would be things that we would leave behind. And obviously, we understand now, as adults, hopefully we understand as adults, that all of these things have adverse effects. Staying up as late as we want, well, that's going to make us pretty miserable the next day. Eating nothing but dessert, well, that has some pretty unhealthy impacts on us. Drinking all the soda that we want, likewise, has some pretty unhealthy impacts on us. Buying all the comic books and baseball cards that we want, probably can't afford that, and it's just not practical. And, when we get down towards the bottom of the list that I put together real quick, there are some things that don't just adversely affect us individually, but there are also some things that aren't really good for the people around us as well. If I litter whenever and wherever I want, that doesn't just adversely affect me, that adversely affects everybody. If I drive 100 miles an hour through town, well, that puts everybody's lives in danger. If I choose never to do another chore in the course of my life, that will have an adverse effect on my entire family. And friends, the reason that as adults we choose not to litter, hopefully, the reason that we choose not to drive 100 miles an hour through town, the reason that we choose to do chores is because we understand that there is a greater good. And by choosing to do the right thing, hopefully at all times, that we are having a positive effect on the greater good. At the same time, I know that you could list example after example after example after example of adults who choose not to pursue the greater good. And I could list for you example after example after example after example of adults choosing not to do the greater good. How many times over the past several years have we heard stories about supposedly grown adults, having complete meltdowns and childlike tantrums on airplanes. And how scary is that? How that affects 100 people or more when they have to turn the plane around and take it back. And gosh, I could go off on that. I experienced that one time. I was on a plane with a lady who had a complete meltdown. Thankfully, it was after the plane had landed, so they didn't have to turn the plane around or make an emergency landing somewhere. Think about the times that you've seen adults who just decided that they were not going to have a reasonable adult conversation with somebody else. They got mad about something, and so just like a child, they just folded their arms and they just turned away and said, "No, I'm not talking to you." And maybe they didn't have that tone in their voice, but that was exactly how they're behaving. I've seen so many adults that have behaved that way. Another example, think about the adults that you have seen their behavior at children's sporting events. And keep in mind, these are children's sporting events, and it's the adults that are behaving just completely and utterly like children. I can think of a particular soccer match that I attended. I didn't coach this particular match, but I attended this particular match for my daughter's soccer team. It was probably about 2.5 years ago. And I remember there was a man who got really, really upset with the reffing of this particular soccer game. And it got to the point where the sideline ref, the sideline ref was walking up and down this half of the sideline. This man started following this ref up and down the sideline, looking over the ref's shoulder, and anytime this ref got the call just the tiniest bit wrong, this adult was yelling at this ref. And then, as soon as the soccer match was over, this adult, this man who was absolutely beside himself, followed the refs off the field and was yelling at the refs. And I remember that this man's wife was trying to interpose herself between her husband and the refs, trying to tell her husband, "Stop, stop, stop." And this man was embarrassing not only his wife, but he was embarrassing all the other parents from the team. He was embarrassing his daughter. He was embarrassing his daughter's coaches. And I remember this really well because I was that man. And I am horrified now when I think about the way that I behaved that day. There's an example of where I behaved like a child. And when I think about it, reflect on it now, I'm just mortified that I behaved that way on that particular day. Why did I choose to behave in these ways? Because we're not concerned, I wasn't concerned about the greater good. Instead, all these people care about who throw tantrums on airplanes and who refuse to have adult conversations and act like complete jerks at children's sporting events, and the list goes on and on. The reason is because all they're concerned about is what they want in that particular moment. I know what I wanted on that particular day is for my daughter's team to win. And when that didn't happen, and when I felt like bad reffing was contributing to that, I lost my mind and acted like, the biggest jerk I've ever acted like probably in my entire life. Because it's all about what they want, what this person wants, what I wanted on that particular day. And it's a reflection of that immaturity. That list that I made earlier, think about how many times I said the words "I want" on this list. I want to stay up as late as I want. I want to drink all the soda I want. I want to buy all the comic books and baseball cards I want. I want to litter whenever and wherever I want. I want, I want, I want. I don't care about the greater good. All I care about is what I want. And look, it would be easy to punish myself and to talk about how the world is going to Hades in a handbag, but the interesting thing is that has been true ever since the beginning of time, ever since the dawn of humanity. I always say, and I'm sure you've heard me say before if you watch many of these sermon videos, that the world has changed a great deal over the last 2,000 years, and yet human nature, I don't think, has changed very much at all over the last 2,000 years. Today is Good Friday. As I record this, it's Good Friday. I'm not sure when you'll end up watching this, but as I record this, it's Good Friday, and we're getting to the end of the Passion Week. And when I think back to the Passion Week 2,000 years ago, I can give you example after example after example of people that on that particular week, all they were concerned about was what they wanted. A perfect example is Judas Iscariot. What did he want? Well, he wanted a quick payoff, or depending on how deep you want to go into Judas psychology and how deep you want to go into the theological conversation, I'm sure some people would say that what Judas wanted was to kickstart the messianic revolution that he fully expected Jesus to usher in. And when it started to seem like Jesus wasn't going to usher in this messianic political revolution and overthrow the Romans, well, Judas decided that he would try to force Jesus' hand by causing Jesus to be arrested by the Romans. So was Judas looking for an easy payout? Was he just looking for 30 pieces of silver? Was he trying to kickstart the revolution? Or is the answer some combination of both of those things? Don't know. Wasn't there. Haven't talked to Judas directly about it. But what I do know is that it was all about what Judas wanted in either case. Take someone who's a good guy from the disciples. Peter was the one who, when Jesus was talking to the disciples and saying, all of you guys are going to abandon me, Peter said, hey, I don't know what the rest of these bozos are going to do, but not me, Lord. I will stand by you through thick or thin. You can count on me. I will be there. And Jesus said, well, guess what, Peter? And guess what? By the end of the Passion Week, Peter had denied Jesus, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And I'm sure a big part of it was the fact that Peter saw what happened to Jesus after he was arrested, and Peter knew where this was headed. He knew that Jesus was probably going to end up on a cross. And Peter didn't want, there's that word want again, Peter didn't want to end up on a cross himself. Peter wanted to save his own skin. And so he denied Jesus. Or take someone who's not Judas, not Peter. Let's take someone like Pontius Pilate. Pilate has this rabbi, for all he knows, this rabbi who's brought to him. And they say that this rabbi is a revolutionary, and Pontius Pilate talks to Jesus and says, yeah, guys, I don't buy it. I don't think he is a revolutionary. Not based on what he's telling me. And so Pilate, what did he want? He wanted to get out of this situation because he said he didn't want to have this innocent man's blood on his hands. So he's looking for an easy way out. He wanted a convenient solution. So what did he do? He said, well, who's the absolute worst Hebrew criminal that we have in our jail system right now? Oh, his name is Barabbas? Okay. Well, I'm going to do this. I'm going to tell the Hebrews that they have a choice, that I am going to fulfill their custom of letting someone go on the Sabbath in honor of the Passover, and so I'm going to give them their choice between Jesus and Barabbas, because I know that if they have to choose between Jesus and Barabbas, they're going to choose Jesus. He gives them the choice, and who do they choose? They choose Barabbas. They choose the worst criminal that was in the jails at the time instead of Jesus. And so, friends, even Pontius Pilate wanted an easy solution. He didn't get it. You know, when you think about the Passion Week 2,000 years ago, and think about Judas doing what he wanted, and Peter doing what he wanted, and even Pilate doing what he wanted. Who's the one person who always put the greater good ahead of him? Well, it's an obvious answer, isn't it? It was Jesus. Jesus, who knew the greater good that he needed to accomplish that week. He always was moving toward that greater good. Even Jesus, for a moment, when he was praying in the garden, as he was understanding and feeling the full weight of what he was going to have to endure over the next 24 hours or so, he prayed and said, God, if there's a way that this cup can be taken from me. But what did Jesus pray next? He said, but not what I want, God, but your will be done. So Jesus said, not what I want, whereas the rest of us, unfortunately, have a tendency to say, this is what I want, give me what I want. Friends, Jesus pursued and he brought about the ultimate greater good, the greatest greater good in human history. And, friends, I'm sure that at some point someone has asked you the question, or you've asked someone else the question, or you've heard the question asked, why do they call it Good Friday? Because Good Friday was the day in which Jesus was crucified. And so it wasn't good for Jesus. It wasn't good for his mother. It wasn't good for the disciples. It wasn't good for Jesus' followers. And of course, I'm sure you've also heard the easy answer to that question. The easy answer is, it wasn't good for Jesus, not at that point anyway. It wasn't good for his followers, not at that point anyway, but it was good for us. And ultimately, it was good for everyone. That's why it's called Good Friday. And that's a good answer to the question. And maybe to even to build on that a little bit, in light of the fact that we've been talking about the greater good in this Good Friday meditation. Jesus accomplished the ultimate and the greatest greater good that humanity has ever known. The ultimate and the greatest greater good in human history. That is what was accomplished on Good Friday. In John 15:13, Jesus said to the disciples, greater love has no one than this, than they lay down their life for their friends. That is exactly what Jesus did for us. That is why this is Good Friday. Amen.